Okay, today we have Senator Ed Markey. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're busy in campaign mode.
No, great to be with you. Thanks. It's fun to be on with you.
So I want to talk about your election coming up, but first there is the obvious news. Trump has tweeted that he would like to delay the election. Now, I'm not going to ask you if he's going to do that because I know it's not going to happen. Only Congress is able to move the date of the election, and Congress isn't going to help him out there. So my question for you is, what have you heard from Republican senators on this? Is there any disillusionment behind the scenes?
Well, of course, publicly they love him. Privately, they can't believe he's the leader of their party and that he controls the Republican base. Their voters, they thought that they controlled their voters, but they don't. And anything he tweets out about the Republican senator to the base, could mean a career-ending experience for them. So on something like this, where they haven't criticized him yet, really, for what he does with Putin. So if he's like once again maybe talking to Putin and it's not being recorded, and Putin's saying, "Hey, why have an election? Why don't you just stay as a dictator? You can drag that out indefinitely. You don't have to ever give up power. Give right through 2021 and say the election still isn't over." And so he's just modeling himself on these authoritarian leaders, and the members of his own party. They go along because it's career-ending because of the crazy radical right-wing control of the Republican base in our country.
Right. I mean, this isn't quasi-fascism either that we're seeing here. It's not fascist adjacent. This is an outright fascist move. So how do your colleagues on the right defend this? Is there a point where they actually cut the cord, or is it like you said, they're all in? They're hitched to his wagon and they'll go down in flames with him if they have to?
I think they're going down. I think they're going down in flames with him. Look, they're fighting over should we give relief to people on a coronavirus package right now?
Right.
Should we help
as if that's a question.
Individuals? Yeah. So and what's happening is there's a pragmatic wing of the Republican Party, and they're saying, of course we have to help people. And then the ideologues show up and they say, there's no way that we're going to be having the federal government get in. So the Republican paradox is that they don't believe in government, but they have to run for office in order to make sure that the government doesn't work. Right. So now they have all these offices, and now we need the government to work. And the Republicans who won on that Republican paradox say, we can't let the government work. And the pragmatists right now are stymied, and we're going to have a crisis. This is just going to bubble and bubble and bubble 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And finally, suburban swing voters are going to be going, we're wiping you out. There's a tsunami coming, and then they'll cut a deal. But it's only after a complete exhaustion of every other option, their own personal survival will be on the line, and then they go in and see Trump and go, we have to do more for these businesses, for these families, for testing, but that's not their real position. Their real position is we don't want the government to work, and they're going to pay a big price in November because of that philosophy. Because obviously there's a contract on the day we're all born that the government will be there. It paves roads, it builds schools, it makes sure that there's medical care for people, and they're just saying, no money for schools, no more money for hospitals, no money for individuals who are unemployed, and it's all because they're petrified of Donald Trump.
We're seeing a sustained campaign right now to sabotage this election, and something that's been flying kind of under the radar is what's happening with the Postal Service. There are purposeful delays. There's no overtime for employees, and this is just when mail-in voting is set to overwhelm the system. Funding for USPS was included in the CARES Act, which it's looking like McConnell has no intention of bringing to the floor for a vote. So how do we ensure that USPS isn't sabotaged, that the Senate won't allocate funding as part of legislation?
Yeah, so the Democrats are asking for $25 billion for the post office. The Republicans' goal is to have the post office collapse, privatize it,
Right.
and just get rid of another couple of 100,000 federal unionized employees. Pretty simple. And it's a formula that helps them politically, and it just happens to coincide with their private sector philosophy. And we can't let it happen because, amongst other things, we're going to have one big mail-in vote in America this year, and we need the post office to be working. So I think what's running counter to their desires is this, that a lot of people are home all day, every day, and now they're seeing the postal worker come down their street every day. And it's now through rain, sleet, snow, gloom of night, or coronavirus, that postal employee is walking up your stairs, taking the risk, exposing themselves to this disease. So as Democrats, we're going to hold. We're not going to let them destroy the Postal Service. It's just one more issue where we have to be absolutely firm in our resistance to this ideological anti-government philosophy, which the Republicans are afflicted with right now. And amongst other things, make the point to them, it's not the post office's fault that the economy is in a collapse because the president isn't handling the coronavirus well, and as a result, advertising has dropped to almost nothing, and as a result, there are no revenues. It has nothing to do with the management of the Postal Service. Right. It has to do with things that are more under the control of the president, and we're not going to allow you to then use it as an excuse to destroy this wonderful couple of 100-year-old service.
And isn't that the ultimate irony of this too, that you know, it was Trump's job to coordinate the response to this virus. He didn't. He failed in his response to the virus. That impacted the Postal Service, and now he's pointing at the Postal Service having failed as some completely separate issue.
Yeah, it's like trying to victimize the victim.
Right.
It's all your fault that that tree fell on your head. It's all your fault. Yeah. You know that trailer came up on the sidewalk and hit you, and now I'm going to punish you by not giving you, not even taking you to the hospital and helping you out. So that's just, you know, how their minds work. It's all, how does it fit inside of the contours of this anti-government philosophy which they have. And they're doing so in an era where most families are realizing they've never needed the government more. Right. It's becoming clear to them that without the government right now, that their ability to fight the disease, fight the economy, in terms of its impact on their families. And so I just think that there's a reckless disregard for their own political well-being that is the overall characterization I would give to the Republican Party right now. And I think they're cruising for a political bruising of historical proportions in November.
Well, I don't think I could have said it better than that. So speaking of voting, there's a primary election between you and Joe Kennedy coming up. The election's on September 1st, but early voting has already started. Now, we're used to seeing these types of primaries from the left. Joe Crowley lost to AOC, Eliot Engel lost to Jamal Bowman. And this is as a new generation is coming to power, right? A generation that's focused on climate change and social justice and expanding healthcare. But this is a situation where you're being primaried, relatively speaking, from the right. Now, do you think that that undercuts the progressive movement at a time when it's hitting its stride, when it's most important?
You know, I can only run as myself, and you know, in this race, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has endorsed me. The Sunrise Movement has endorsed me. Progressive Democrats of America have endorsed me. NARAL, Planned Parenthood, Sierra Club, the NRDC, they're all with me in this race. So I'm running on the issues, and interestingly, the issues have a lot of charisma this year. Green New Deal, yeah. Medicare for all, taking on the gun lobby. And so from my perspective, I accept this race. And it's actually been an incredible experience to see the groundswell of progressive support all across the state, and largely driven by young people who are rallying to my side because of how much they care about the Green New Deal, the climate, and social justice that AOC, when we drafted the Green New Deal, is an integral part of what we're trying to achieve, because obviously minority communities, Black and brown communities, poorer communities suffer disproportionately from environmental injustice. And we actually call it out in the Green New Deal. And it anticipated, in a lot of ways, where we are right now in the country, because that's what people want. They want justice, and not just environmental, but racial, criminal justice, educational, and healthcare justice as well. And so this rally to my side is actually very powerful. And AOC today began a television commercial up here in Massachusetts for me. And what she did at the end of it was she concluded by saying, it's not age, it's the age of your ideas which are important, which is why we need Ed Markey to stay in the United States Senate.
Right. Totally agree. I mean, here's the thing. Democrats are hopefully poised to take control of government for the first time in a decade when we need climate change legislation. The time to move was yesterday, right? So, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but the solution here doesn't seem to be removing the champion for bold climate change legislation in the Senate at a time when we need climate change legislation champions in the Senate.
So, so thank you for that. Yeah, let's just put it this way. If Donald Trump gets a second term, it's like a death sentence for the planet. It will have gone 8 years, done nothing, rolled back the progress which we were making, giving permission to other countries in the world to sit on the sidelines, to not really act, to really not move, and really not create millions of jobs, which we could if we unleashed the Green New Deal. So that's all on the ballot in November. Matter of fact, the Paris Climate Accord expires in the first week of November. So that's on the ballot as well. And we can now see years later that even that agreement is not strong enough, and we have to strengthen that, but we need Democrats to do it. So from my perspective, it's at the top of the list of the reasons why I want to go back to the Senate. It is to make sure that President Biden has a climate champion on the Senate floor that's already done it before. My law to increase fuel economy standards, my law to increase the appliance efficiency standards, blocking the need for a couple of hundred coal-burning plants ever having to have been built. The Waxman-Markey bill in 2009, still the only comprehensive climate bill to ever pass either chamber of Congress, and we passed that in June of 2009. So I know how to do this. I'm ready to go. I'm the chair of the climate task force for the Democrats in the Senate, and that's why I'm fighting so hard to get back, and why it's so gratifying to me to have Sunrise Movement and all these other progressive groups coming in. I mean, incredibly aggressively to support my candidacy.
So does running against a Kennedy in Massachusetts pose any particular problems for you?
I would prefer to view it as somebody running against a Markey from Malden, who has done the job. I'm here in my house. I'm here in the house I was raised in. This is where I live. It's a blue-collar community, and my father drove a truck for the Hood Milk Company. My mother was going to be senior class president, but my grandmother died. It was an immigrant mother and father. So my grandmother died when my mother was 17, about to become senior class president. So she had to become a single mom, really, for the younger three kids in the family. So here I am. We made it exactly four blocks from where the immigrants got off the boat. And but I grew up here with a mother and a father who was a truck driver, and I could see them struggling to pay bills at the kitchen table when I was growing up, and I know right now that people are struggling to pay their bills all across Massachusetts and all across the country, and I still live in this blue collar community, and Cory Booker lives in Newark. I live here. There are dozens of other senators who don't live in gateway communities the way we do. And it helps and animates me to have an agenda which I know that people need. So Kamala Harris and I, for example, we have introduced a bill for $2,000 a person until we get out of this coronavirus. So that would be for a couple, $4,000. They had a child, $6,000. Pay the bills, pay the rent, pay the mortgage, pay the medicine, pay the food. Let's help people get through. It wasn't their fault that all of this happened. And those progressive values I get from just living here and seeing how these people are being affected by the pandemic and the consequent economic crisis. And And that's all I can really bring to this race. I can only bring a Markey to the race, and the more than 500 laws that I have put on the books over the years, which I will say is not something that my opponent has done in his near decade in the House of Representatives. I'll just leave it there.
So let's actually talk about the Green New Deal. That's the main issue you're running on, and rightfully so. There's a perception that issues like the Green New Deal and Medicare for All are outside the mainstream. I'm sure that basically no one has spoken to more people about this than you. Is it outside of the mainstream?
Well, when AOC and I introduced it in February of 2019, we just got killed by Fox News. We got killed by the president. We even got killed by people inside the Democratic Party. Oh, look at them. Socialists. Way out there. Just unrealistic. And why'd they throw in all that stuff about intersectionality and social compacts? And everyone should get health care and a job. They're just so far out of the mainstream. So it unleashes the Sunrise Movement. By the time you reach the presidential debates, all of a sudden, everybody's got a position on the Green New Deal. Everyone's educating themselves on the magnitude of the problem and what their particular response could be.
And we got into suddenly intersectionality matters.
Now we have George Floyd, we have coronavirus, and everyone else. Well, you know, the important issue is intersectionality. The important issue is understanding how it all interconnects with everything else. And so here we are, no longer, I would say, socialists, but more like prophets. And nothing fits this moment better than the Green New Deal. Nothing fits this moment better than Medicare for All. Millions of people now lost their health insurance. We've got, and guess what people are focusing on now? Oh my goodness. In the United States, we're 45th in the world in terms of mortality. We're 38th in the world in health outcomes. And we spend twice as much as the rest of the world. Maybe the system is broken. Maybe it's not a healthcare system, but a sick care system. And by the way, there's millions more now coming with little likelihood that it's going to change in 2020 or 2021 or 2022. We're in the middle of a meltdown. So, hey, you know, maybe the Medicare for All idea is a good idea where everyone gets the coverage they need. You know, maybe this Green New Deal is a good idea where we could create millions of jobs, putting people to work in the same way FDR put millions of people to work, doing great work for the country that we still look back at with great admiration. So sometimes liberals are right, but too soon. So you got to wait for people to catch up. Okay? Right. It no longer seems socialistic. It now seems pragmatic. And you can actually see it in the program that President Biden announced for climate last week. Much more ambition than a year ago, and he asked AOC to help him with the drafting of it. Yeah. So that wasn't on the scoreboard in 2019. So yeah, the country has moved dramatically.
And I do want to talk about Vice President Biden's plan, but I do want to stay on this for just a moment. How do you cut through the BS about cow farts and no more hamburgers and whatever else the right cooks up, you know, to convey to people the necessity of this legislation? What's the most effective strategy? Because we know we're going to hear that. The right we can cure cancer, and the right would say that, you know, would demonize it. They turn it into a boogeyman. So how, you know, what's the most effective strategy that you've seen since you've been out on the campaign trail, since you've been speaking to people, since this bill was introduced, you know, to bring people aboard?
We just have to explain it to people. It's net zero carbon, net zero. So obviously, if you want to build windmills, you're going to have steel. So the question is, okay, it's not that we're going to say that you don't have to manufacture steel, that it's not going to create some pollution. It's that after you then deploy the wind turbines, it winds up net zero. Yeah. How hard is that to figure out? And the same thing will be true in each sector, that once you apply the energy efficiency strategy, or you apply the new no-till farming strategy, or you apply a strategy where you're retrofitting the buildings. There's some carbon may have to have been expended in order to accomplish the goal, but then as long as it all nets out at zero, we're okay. And so we'll be flexible in terms of how you get there, but inflexible in terms of getting there. And in that context, you can still have an ice cream cone or a hamburger.
That's right.
If you want. Although Impossible Burgers, if you haven't had one yet, you should have one.
I mean, look, I live in LA. You're lucky if you can find an Impossible Burger on the shelves while you have pounds and pounds of regular burgers just sitting there. So I don't think there's any
I will
shortage
tell
of
you,
that.
I think Burger King last year showed a 6% increase in revenues because of the Impossible Burger.
Yeah.
And that's just in the first couple of years. So how does it taste? Great. And so this whole issue is just, there's so many red herrings that the Republicans throw out there that we need to build an aquarium, to hold them all. And you got to explain it one by one in each instance how the whole thing works. And ultimately, I had them come in and serve Impossible Burgers to all the members of the Democratic caucus, and they were like, "Is this a real hamburger?" And because you have to explain to people how the world is changing. But even with agriculture, we can subsidize farming so they move to no-till farming, so that there's a dramatic reduction in carbon which goes up into the atmosphere. So it's not out of the realm of the possible that once we win and then we pass our climate legislation, which we will, that when people look back in 10 years, they're going to look back now the same way they look at black rotary dial phones and they say, how did we have that same thing for 75 years? Why didn't we move? And there's a certain power of stasis that controls the universe. But once you break out and you create this new perspective, then I think everyone is going to move there very rapidly. By the way, the same thing happened with smoking. Like half of Americans smoked, in 1950, and now we're down to like 18%.
Yeah, I think it's actually one of the lowest rates in the developed world.
Yeah, so now, a lot of it was that the tobacco companies had a great strategy, and then we, on the progressive side, we had a counter strategy, and we didn't begin it until years later. But once we explained it to people that it's better for them, then that's now the default position. Not totally, and there's a lot of things that the industry does to try to up the percentage of use. The same thing's going to be true with solar, with wind, with all electric vehicles. There was one report, I was talking to Gina McCarthy today, who was the head of the EPA, and she told me today that there's a study she just read, where by 2024, an all-electric vehicle is going to be equally competitive with the internal combustion engine. And what happens at that point, when there's no price differential at all? Which car are young people going to buy? Which car? And we deploy the charging stations all across the country. We make them ubiquitous, so people are plugging in. The battery life expectancy just gets higher and higher, and before you know it, people look back and they say, there was a time when people used to pull into a gas station and put gasoline in the tank of the car, and the kids are going to go, "Come on, no one ever did that." Everyone always plugged.
Not only that, there's a time when half of our government representatives were digging in their heels to entrench that system.
Yeah, when I was a kid and the phone rang, or anyone in America, when I was a kid, people would go, hurry, it's long distance. Grandma's on the phone. Like it's it's like $1 a minute, right? Today, kids are on the phone calling their cousins in Montana, like it's nothing. Because the technology just changed, right. And we're going to see the same thing in the cost of energy, in the cost of energy technologies, and the revolution is going to take a lot less time than anyone thinks. It's going to be just like moving from dial-up to broadband. Mm-hmm. We moved from nothing to Google, eBay, Amazon, Hulu, YouTube in about 10 years. Yeah. We branded it, went global, and now half the people in Africa are walking around with an iPhone. And it's because it was invented in the United States. And that's the optimistic view of the future, which I have, that we have done it before, we can do it again, and we just got to get the fossil fuel industry politically out of the way.
Right. And you know what? What's most tragic about this is that in places like West Virginia and Appalachia and just coal country in general, instead of using this time wisely, instead of using it to transition to renewables so that these communities can set themselves up for success when we inevitably transition away from coal and fossil fuels, the Republicans in charge are just digging in their heels and sticking with fossil fuels. And it's their own constituents who are going to get hurt most by this. You know, that's the tragic part, that it's them who are going to get left behind.
Right. The next coal executive who orders a coal burning plant, the next utility executive who orders a coal burning plant, he will have failed that test that Trump is trying to pass, remembering those 5 words. They'll just put a butterfly net over him. Just say, right, you're the last utility executive in America who has ordered a coal burning plant, because wind is now less expensive, solar is less expensive, energy efficiency is less expensive, and ultimately the marketplace controls. And for years, the utilities did not allow the marketplace to work because they denied access to the renewables. They denied, the efficiency of new technologies. But because of democratic progressive states, because of some of the laws we were able to get on the books, we've transformed how people view these technologies just in the last 10 years. And now we're ready to take the big leap. We're ready to go and deploy 5 times, 10 times greater than we have right now. And we can do it in a decade, actually. And once it happens, people are not going to want to go back to the old days. My father used to say, Eddie, when people say, let's go back to the good old days, tell them to give back their car, give back the washing machine, give back the dryer, give back the phone. Yeah, we'll send you back to the good old days. And he said, you know how many people want to go? He says, you know how many people want to go back? No one will go back. And that's what it's going to be like in 10 years. It'll be an iPhone in your hand as you turn down the air conditioning from 1,000 miles away to make sure that you're saving energy. And it's all going to happen with the younger generation, the Sunrise Movement, which is, to me, just like water on the desert. They're like the army coming over the hill to rescue the country, and these young people are going to be looked back at as the revolutionaries that created this dramatic change our country needs.
So speaking of change, let's talk about Vice President Biden. He released his climate plan. It's a $2 trillion plan. It calls for net zero emissions by 2035 for wind and solar, carbon capture, electric vehicles, how to protect communities of color in the process. You're an original co-sponsor of the Green New Deal. You're the OG GND guy. So, as the champion for climate change in the Senate, how do you feel about this plan?
Well, I got to say, it's a lot better than what the vice president was talking about 8 months ago.
Right.
And again, the point of the Green New Deal is just to continue to up the ante in terms of the ambition we're trying to extract out of the system. And so I applaud the vice president for putting that plan out. I applaud the vice president for asking AOC to come in as one of his advisors in crafting it. And at the same time, I'm going to continue to advocate for 100% within 10 years. Because I ultimately believe that the magnitude of the problem, the fact that our own scientists in the Trump administration have concluded that without change, with business as usual, the planet warms by 8 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit in the next 80 years. 8 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. And along the East Coast, we see sea rise 8 to 10 feet high. 8 to 10 feet higher than where we are right now. So there's an urgency to it that we just have to keep challenging the system. And I know it can happen because I believe in the future. I believe in our ability to invent and deploy our way to a transformation of our energy sector. And as you're saying, to do it in a way that is infused with social justice, with intersectionality, with a recognition that in the original New Deal, racist Southern senators made sure that sharecroppers weren't in Social Security. Domestic workers weren't in Social Security. So we just have to rectify that historic problem and make sure this time that poor people, frontline communities are given all the protections which they need.
Right. I think it's ironic because now those people are called essential, and yet they're, those are the ones who have the least protections of anybody.
And again, they're more vulnerable to asthma because they live in more polluted environments, and then they're more vulnerable to the coronavirus. And from my perspective, we can see them. We see they're taking risks. We see that they're more exposed. We know that their families are more exposed. They can't Zoom to work the way a lot of people can. And we're going to owe them big time next year, which is why I think it's an FDR moment in January of 2021. Let's give them the child care. Let's give them the paid sick leave. Let's give them the incomes which they deserve. Let's give them the protection. Many of them are immigrants. Let's create a pathway to citizenship for 11 million immigrants in our country. Let's make sure that they get the reward they deserve for the risk that they're taking on behalf of all the rest of us right now.
Well said. So let's talk about you for a second. I want to talk about your sneakers. They've kind of taken on a life of their own. You have these Nike Air Revolutions from the 90s. What's the deal with these sneakers?
When I was a kid, I really wanted to be a basketball player. I mean, in the worst way. The Boston Celtics, we won the title every year, and then you have these dreams of your greatness. And so I would play basketball 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours a day, all day, every day, 7 days a week, school year, summer. And my mother would say, Eddie, your father and I were going to donate your brain to Harvard Medical School as a completely unused human organ. Okay. We just can't believe. Will you spend more time on trigonometry? Will you spend more time on calculus here, please? And I couldn't find the relevance to my life of calculus or trigonometry. But shooting a basketball was just key to my life. So I just kept practicing and practicing and practicing. And it did affect my grades in calculus and trigonometry. I'm not going to deny this. However, in the Congress, there's a gym. And they have a shooting contest each year. Who can hit the most free throws? And out of 50, you get to shoot once. So about 12 years ago, I won. I shot 47 out of 50 free throws, wearing my Air Revolutions, which I've had for 30 years. And at that point, I just said, hey, Ma, it's worth it, Ma. I did it.
That's right.
I won the contest. I wasn't wasting my time.
Yeah.
And so those Air Revolutions, they're vintage, no question about it. And they've had to be retooled a few times just to keep them going. And in this race, they're kind of like my lucky charm, my talisman that I'm using no matter where I go. And actually, I think at some point they might even announce for office themselves. That's how popular they're getting. So those are my Air Revolutions, and I think every one of us kind of harbors some kind of childhood dream that still continues, as to what you could have been. So I had no vertical game and no horizontal game, but if it's stationary and there was nobody on me, I was a dead eye. Unfortunately, real basketball has to.
I'm just gonna say I don't know how well that's gonna serve you in the NBA, but well, I for one can say that at least I'm glad you settled for the Senate.
I appreciate it.
So one more thing. I was also told by your staff that that you used to be an ice cream truck driver, and that your preferred ice cream is a scoop of coffee and a scoop of sherbet, and you eat them together. So my question is, when the Boston Globe endorsed you, did they not know about this?
I know it sounds unusual, but I drove an ice cream truck. That's how I worked my way through Boston College. Mainly because, as my mother said to me, Eddie, if you had done better in calculus and trigonometry, you would have got a scholarship. Yeah. So don't blame us that you're working, every day all summer driving an ice cream truck. It's your choice to play basketball. So she blamed everything that went wrong on basketball. Yeah. But in an ice cream truck, you got every ice cream. I mean, you got chocolate cupboards and chocolate eclairs and strawberry shortcakes and Zingos and you name it. So, congressional expert is kind of an oxymoron. like a contradiction in terms, like Salt Lake City nightlife or jumbo shrimp. And so one thing I did become an expert on, though, was ice cream. And so over all those years, I don't know how, it just came to me. And you guys should try it out there. Try a scoop of orange sherbet and a scoop of, when you buy an ice cream cone now, it's almost like enough to feed a family. It's so big. And so that just so they can extract more money out of it. But just try a double scoop. And if anyone wants, just contact me, and you can thank me personally, because I'm telling you, it'll work for you. Coffee and orange sherbet, a scoop apiece.
One more question. How can we help?
You've got millions of people who watch your podcast, and because it's so inexpensive for people to use their wireless devices, if they want, they can just contact my campaign, and they can be making calls for me no matter where they are. We're going to be in a big get out the vote effort. And if they want, they could send a nice contribution, modest, if necessary, to my campaign. You just have to go to my website, my campaign website, edmarkey.com, and there it is. And whatever help you can give me on either end. We only have a month left to go, and we're down to the wire. It's pretty much a dead heat at this point. But with the Boston Globe endorsing me and all the other progressive groups with me, we have a lot of momentum. And anyone who's out there who wants to help, it just go to our campaign website and come on through. We'd love to put you to work.
All right, Senator Markey. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, and thanks for your leadership through the decades since before I was born, and best of luck in your election.
Thank you. It's going great. Got a lot of momentum, and I really love being on with you, Brian. Thank you.